Unfair. So, okay. Let's see. Today we're a little off schedule. I realize I'm a little ahead. So we will go ahead and talk about benefits of bacteria today. Wednesday, there's a group project scheduled. So the pimple case study is what it's called. You can find that case study in the modules. So you scroll down to find the case study. What we'll do is, well, basically just there's no lecture. We're going to meet. I will take roll. So make sure you're here. And then you guys can get into just self-organized groups and go over that. I like these case studies again because it lets us dive into kind of real world situations where you might be dealing with microbes. Sometimes the questions are not the easiest, so I encourage you to go find the answers. It's okay to search for it. Unfortunately, there's no like beginner's case study. They always assume that you have some sort of microbiology background. So none of them are going to be that easy. But anyways, you can work together. There's more information about this type of infection in chapter 19. I made a note of that in Canvas. So you can always go look in the book for more information as well. So that's what we'll do Wednesday, and then we'll continue on with bacterial genetics on Friday. So I'm just a little ahead of the schedule right now. So, is there anything else we got to talk about? We're doing gram staining this week in lab, so make sure you're not wearing clothes that you like, just in case, because we'll be working with stains again and fire. Yeah, fire, right. Anything else? Comments, discussion? Word on the street. Is homecoming this week? Yeah, okay. So we got all the cool homecoming stuff this week. Nothing? Okay. So we'll go ahead and go through it. Today is talking a little bit about benefits of bacteria. This is kind of nice before we get into talking about the downside of parasites and bacteria and things. So thinking about how do microbes help us, our bodies, our environment, what do they do, food production, that kind of stuff. So this will give you a good idea for what they are. There's some really interesting examples of microbes being used in what's called bioremediation. So, or bioaugmentation is another example where you can add bacteria to soil. But here with bioremediation, this example talks about a bacteria that actually degrades explosive residues. So you can find these naturally sometimes, but sometimes they're also bioengineered. So you can, I think they actually bioengineered a bacteria that you can put on oil slicks that will break down oil products. It's pretty cool. So in this case, they had this area where they made a lot of explosives. They figured out they had a lot of TNT left in the soil. And of course, that's explosive. So would have been quite expensive either to try to collect it or isolate it, or just leave it in the ground and kind of just, fence off that area and not use it anymore. So they couldn't really figure out what the best way to do it was. So what they did is they designed a bacteria, bioremediation is what it's called. And they mixed in this bacteria along with churning over the soil. And over time, what the bacteria did was actually break down the TNT through some natural cycles, which then basically allowed them to use the land again. So it's kind of cool. So they were able to get rid of it. Of course, they just did this kind of as a natural way using compost. So 99% of the contaminating TNT. That's pretty cool, and save a lot of money as well, right? So you've probably heard of these things called Superfund sites. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. I don't know. You can look them up. But this has been around for a long time, where they've identified different areas across the country that are contaminated with something or other. And then they put money and effort toward trying to clean those up. So kind of cool that you can design or find bacteria that can do these things. Pretty cool. Okay. So let's talk about some microbes in ecosystems and what they do. And of course, they are part of the ecosystem. So the ecosystem is all the species together. And then, you don't have to memorize these terms, population, communities. But what you can think about is that they do work in communities as part of the ecosystem. They do play a key role in some of the cycles. I think I mentioned some of the biogeochemical cycles, and I will mention them again today, so that's a reminder. But we tend to forget about these smallest things since they're so simple and not very interesting, at least unless you look at them really closely, that they do play a key role in some of these processes. They do fill what's called I never know how to say this, either a niche or a niche, however you want to say it. I'm not sure. I always call it niche, so whatever. But these organisms do play a role, and of course, that's going to depend on what they do. And, I sound redundant, but having enzymes that enable them to do whatever job that they're supposed to be doing in the environment. You see, I'm not the only one that cares about that. Okay, so. And then, of course, the physical and chemical factors, right? So depending on where they're living, we talked about some of the things that they require in order to grow in those particular areas. They can be involved in a couple of different things. So assimilation and dissimilation. Assimilation is basically where you're using things to build new molecules. So say like macromolecules. So a lot of organisms, bacteria, microbes are what are called primary producers. So they can build new things, build up the structures. If they're photosynthetic, then they can build biomass just like plants do. Plants, I think later on we'll talk about plants, are one of the major biomass production agents on soil. In fact, I've seen some studies where they say that photosynthetic bacteria actually rival plants for the amount of CO2 that they fix. So the amount of complex sugars, for example, that they make. So I don't know, that sounds kind of cool, but I always thought that there's a lot more plants than there are bacteria, but that's that's what they say. So they can build things, and then they're also part of the decomposition process as well. So they can decompose a lot of things like dead animals and things and return those elements back to the primary producers or use them themselves to fix new things. Oh, and that's what I just mentioned. So on land, plants are a major biomass production. So they do a lot of the photosynthesis. They're autotrophs, right? So they make their own food and then they can use that. Let's see, but a lot of that stuff that the biomass that's pushed off are going to be decomposed by fungi and bacteria. So we find a lot of these things in the soil. Here's some cool pictures. So you can see free floating bacteria. You can see bacteria associated with other fungi, or let's see, those are, yeah, it's a surface of fungi. I was trying to think of, sometimes you'll see a lot of times, you'll see them in symbiotic relationships. And I have a list of those again, so you can see it. This is actually a nematode on the left-hand side. So it's a type of worm. So there are nematodes that are running around and they eat bacteria as well. They can be involved in some processes like that. So that's kind of the idea. The microbes are going to be down here at the bottom. They're recycling detritus or biomass that has been produced. In some cases, they can fix other compounds, which we'll talk about. And then, of course, that can then be provided back to plants or animals. So you want to think of them as what do they call this? They call this a food web. That's what they kind of call it. So a cycle. So a food web is where these things are connected and they're each supporting each other. I mean, it doesn't sound like it, but if you lose these microbes at the bottom, that kind of, you lose the support system for that food triangle, if you will. So that's not a good thing. Okay, I mentioned some of the symbiotic relationships again, so I'll just list them here. So mutualism, where both things are going to benefit. It's kind of the same thing with synergism, commensalism. I got these confused last time. So commensals are where just one thing kind of benefits and the other one is not harmed. In the next week or two, we'll start looking at some of the parasitism. So when microbes affect humans negatively, so we'll kind of focus on that. amenzialism, I haven't really covered that, so we probably won't talk about that much. But that's kind of the list, so you can go through it. I think you guys have seen this before. Always reminds me of this song, Dora the Explorer. She sang a song. If you guys watched that as a kid, it's called Symbiotic Friends. So you should really look it up. It's kind of cute. So at least for your kids, maybe someday you can watch it again. So, but actually, I think she got the terminology wrong when she was singing it, because it was like it's one of those cattle and the birds that are on it. And she was just talking about symbiotic friends, but she actually should have said like they were like mutualistic friends, but that doesn't sound as good in a song, I think. So yeah. So they just had to go with what sounded better, I think. Okay, let's see what else. I've mentioned that microbes are part of the microbiome. So this is class of organisms that are they call it an organ here, which probably is a good definition now. Seems like every year something is published which talks about some other influence that our microbes have on our body and how changing that has some kind of connection to disease. So it's kind of interesting to me to think about how these things in our body can influence us, and in fact, how it changes from person to person. So in different populations, you can see different microbiomes and how they can change, like with your location or with your diet. And that those changes, if those things don't work properly, then you can see a lot of negative effects on there. Okay, let's ask a question here and wake you guys up a little bit. So if I asked you, whoops, play. If you have a microbe that gives you some sort of vitamin, which this is a true story. So microbe provides you with vitamin K. What relationship is this? What would you guys say? You gotta work out your arm muscles here. You've been relaxing all weekend probably, yeah? After all those exams you've had, all the writing. Did I miss anybody? Hold it up. I just gotta get you to move your fingers. Yeah, it's picky. It's picky. Picky. So it's not parasitism, right? Now I think one answer is a little better. So some people said commensalism. Why do you think I think mutualism is a little better of an answer there?
Do you need vitamin D to survive?
So we know it's benefiting us, right? Why commensal is just benefiting one? Why do I think it's benefiting two?
It's living inside of the world's house. But we eat.
Yeah, so remember that we're providing them with a nice, warm, moist environment and food. So part of that idea with microbiome is they're also digesting things, which again, a lot of that research has been put into looking at like short chain fatty acids and its effect on health. So there is something there. The more and more research comes out to see that we are benefiting from either vitamins or that, and then they're benefiting because we give them food and a nice environment. So, and what's interesting is our immune system selects for good bacteria, selects against bad bacteria. Well, I don't know if we'll talk about it in this class, but if you ever take an immunology class, you'll learn that our body tries to select for good things in the body. It's kind of interesting. Okay, any questions on that? Okay. Okay, let's see what else we're going to talk about. So lots of fun. And if you're interested, do some research into that. I think it's pretty cool, all the different things that they've seen. Let's see, diseases. So zoonoses, we'll start seeing some of these next time, or not this week, but next week probably, where we talk about how we can pick up diseases from animals and from the environment for that much. So we'll look at some of these things. What I try to do in this class is not cover every single last disease, but maybe some of the major ones you might see if you're working in a health environment, a health place around this area. So, so I might mention some of these other ones, but we won't see a lot of them. Although I say that, and there was just a Chagas disease, just lately. I think it was in Utah. That's the kissing bug disease. You ever heard about that? Usually in South America, where they bite people's lips. That's why they call them the kissing bug. So I say that, but maybe I'm kind of wrong. You know, things are starting to appear here that we don't normally see. So I guess take that for a grain of salt. Let's hope that we don't see huge outbreaks of a lot of these things. Although we did, didn't you guys get that measles notice? Yeah, so it kind of made me second guess it because I was like, when did I get that measles vaccine? Probably when I was a kid. Let's hope it's still good. So what is it? Look for rash and fever, right? High fever, right? It's probably the first few things. Anyways. So yeah, I guess it's kind of the same thing. We talk about this stuff, but it might pop up. It might pop up, and it's kind of scary sometimes. Okay, just a review of the biogeochemical cycles. I think I already mentioned these, so sorry from being a little redundant. But they're involved in the carbon cycle. That is directly related to the biomass that we just talked about. So CO2 is fixed through these processes like photosynthesis. And then as those organisms break back down, then that biomass is recycled back to CO2 and other carbon compounds. So again, there's going to be microbes that are involved in this. The nitrogen cycle, I think I mentioned that N2 is very difficult to break apart. And in fact, humans can't do it. So we're dependent on nitrogen fixing organisms in the soil. So you'll see a lot of organisms that are related to rhizomes, for example, or they work with other plants, and then they are able to break down nitrogen into kind of ammonia products, compounds, and then those can be used as fertilizer. So that's also a really important cycle. What about food? Do we use microbes in food? Let's see, I don't remember what my next question is here. Huh? I didn't hear you, Paige. Was that you?
No,
No.
I can answer, fermentation, we make bread, beer, all the fun stuff.
Yeah. Anybody like yogurt? Cheese? Pickle? I don't know, anything that's preserved or fermented, sauerkraut. Yeah. There's all sorts of cool stuff that people recommend fermented foods for. Okay, cool. So right, back way before refrigeration or ice, a lot of times fermentation was used as preservative, right? Preservation, right? So sorry, I can't talk today. Fermentation, at least alcoholic fermentation, right? Through yeast, that'll make a lot of alcohol, a lot of ethanol, and at high enough levels, that tends to be a preservative. So it was one way to preserve things like grape juice, which you can't really keep around without refrigeration. Also, you can improve digestibility. So treating things with bacteria or other microbes can help us digest things better and increase the nutrients, the amount of usable nutrients in the gut. So some things like really high fiber things cannot be used very easily by humans, but breaking those down can release a lot more nutrients for that. It can produce vitamins, so other flavor molecules. So things like yeast extract, can provide a lot of amino acids, which can affect flavor profiles, of different foods. You can ferment things in the milk, produce acid, so you can make yogurt or cheese. Really smelly types of cheese, yeah. So maybe some of you guys like that. I am more of a mild cheese fan, I guess. So although I wish it was better for you. It's too bad. A lot of it's just fat. Soybeans. So this is another one that's fermented a lot of times. So soybean is used as a vegetable protein, but you have a lot of other things as well. This is called tempeh, which I'm not sure what that is. Maybe somebody knows what that is, but that's also produced from soybeans, and that's the mold that is used for that, rhizopus. I mentioned alcoholic fermentation. So that's one of the types of fermentation that you should be familiar with. So this is done by yeast, produces a lot of alcohol, but also can produce a lot of amino acids as well. So there's a lot of other substances that are desirable there, okay? Okay, so let's see. Throw another question at you here. I was trying to think of what questions could I ask on these kind of topics. Oh, I need to change it in here. That's what it is. So not a very hard topic in this lecture, but what about this? I tried to, this is more of a survey, which might mean there's more than one answer. Try to trip you guys up a little bit. No, it's okay. Remember, this is more my way to try to pick on you guys. Please pay attention. Does it benefit you, forcing you to come to class if you can? I hope you would say yes. Okay, let's see. They're basically all right, except for the none of the above. Show graph. Oh, there we go. So yeah, preservation. The reason why I mentioned probiotics is that because of what I just mentioned, like with yeast, they make a lot of other compounds, and those can be usable by other organisms, right? So you can think of that. And then food preparation. So we like bread, for example, and we use yeast to do that. Okay, so just think about lots of different examples. So before we get into all the bad stuff that microbes do, I wanted to make sure we knew all the good stuff that they do as well. So here's another interesting example of wastewater treatment. So there's several different processes that are used to clean water, and microbes are used as part of this for a couple different reasons. One is to break down products. So again, it's involved in the breakdown of these things. Second one is to actually replace the bad bacteria. So when people are treating wastewater, they have to be really careful with releasing this stuff, obviously, back into the environment. But if they add good microbes to that, can actually force out or kill off the bad bacteria. So you're kind of replacing that niche, if you will. Just like what we see in the body, the microbiome, you never want to lose those organisms because then you can get other things to come in there and take over and then make you guys kind of sick. So this is kind of an interesting part where you obviously there's several different treatments, separation of solids, and then part of that treatment is treating it with bacteria to break down and fight off all those bad things. Yes, ma'am.
When it says decrease the VOD, what's that stand for?
Oh, good question. I don't remember. I'd have to go back and look it up. Anybody know? BOD. Something density. I can't remember what it is. Good question. Good question. Somebody want to Google it? Why don't we just answer? We have time to answer it right now. Oh, okay. So why did that matter? Decreasing the oxygen demand?
So the biochemical.
That, to me, probably is you're preventing, when you have a lot of oxygen in there, that actually increases growth. If I remember correctly. So I think this might be referring to, you're decreasing that, then you're not allowing other organisms to use it. So that's another reason. That's part of what I was talking about, is where they can take over the niche and not allow the growth. So I think that kind of goes.
Would that be like, I don't remember the phrase, but it was like quorum something?
Oh, quorum sensing?
Yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because you can kind of think of that, right? So how can we phrase this? So like out competing, I'll just say this, bad bacteria. So this is paraphrasing what I'm trying to say here. So if you put in good bacteria, you can compete for oxygen. You can also send out signals, right, to decrease growth. That is quorum sensing, is what you're talking about. Well, see if I can spell it. Quorum sensing, but also, I mean, oxygen is also part of a bigger level of nutrients, right? So I think that's kind of what we're talking about here. We're out competing organisms for the nutrients and not allowing them to grow. Thanks for looking that up. We'll have to do some more research there. See if we're on the right track. That's kind of interesting. You can say the same thing, apply this to your body, right? So if you lose the good bacteria that are using your nutrients for good, then other things like Clostridium or something else can come in and take the place of that, right? And they'll be more than happy to take residence in your body. It's not a funny thing. It's a hard infection to get rid of. Well, that's what I hate. Okay, I don't want to dwell too much on that, but that's good food for thought. I shouldn't use food and wastewater treatment in the same idea there. Well, yeah, I mean, I mean, technically, usually they use chlorine or something at the end as well. So technically you should be able to, yeah.
Technically bring Michigan's water, but.
Oh, yeah. What did they have a problem with? Lead?
Fracking, stuff, everything.
Yeah, all sorts of things. Okay, and then here's another example of wetland restoration. So I think this just kind of goes back to the idea of bioremediation or bioaugmentation. There's two different words you can look at it. Bioremediation. Remediate means to like fix or redo. And then to bioaugment something means to provide other things to allow these wetlands, for example, to regrow or grow better things. So rather than growing really nasty things like those algal blooms. So when you have too many nutrients, then you can get this growth of undesirable organisms. These processes allow you to basically try to grow the better things or redo them. Okay. So things to think about. Any questions on expectations for these? And I think I already asked you some questions about this, why are microbes beneficial? What can they do in the environment? So you just need to kind of keep track of some of the good things that they do. Okay, let's talk about the case study a little bit, give you a preview. So if you scroll down, you see this right here, this pimple case study right there, which everyone's going to turn in the questions based on these. So you can, you can work on it in groups and then you'll turn in the questions individually. But what you do with these are all kind of health related. So it talks about, we don't have to read it right now, but oops. Talks about usually a patient that comes in, they give you questions there. Usually what I see with these is the doctors or nurses will start with a short list of what it could be. And then they usually do some tests. So there's some terms in here you can look at, but let's see, right down here, they do some tests on what kind of organism that they are. So look at this. Does this look familiar with what we've been talking about? They talk about plating, culturing on a specific or differential plate, and then running what? Fermentation test. Come on, you guys don't look impressed that what I've been doing is actually does apply to real life. Come on, give me something. That's good for a Monday. That's good for a Monday. Okay, so I'll take what I can get at this point. So anyways, take a look through here. You know, when you run into words that you don't know, you can look them up. It's fine. Some of the questions are a little bit beyond what we've been talking about. It's okay. You can work on them together. The point here is to try to apply some of this class to real life. So I don't have to keep trying to convince you. Okay. And then what I'm excited about is like a lot of the culturing. So you can look at the plates they used, why they use them, and then try to figure out what they're dealing with. Okay. And then, like I mentioned, there's also more on this particular organism in chapter 19. So that's one of the chapters where they just basically go through every single pathogen that you could get exposed to in different categories, which I'm not going to be lecturing on that. It seems really boring to just go through and talk about every single last disease, but you can go back and reference that information. Okay. So that's what we're going to do on Wednesday. Be much better than lecturing. And of course, I'll be here to answer questions.